In minimalistic street photographs, we want to use only a few elements. It's all about excluding something from the composition. In this approach, the philosophy is less is more. Hi, it's Peter here, and let's get right into the business. The urban environment has lots of things to be included in the photographs, and if you photograph everything, it might be a bit of too much in the image. Usually 3 elements or 3 points that might interest the viewer is enough, and in minimalistic we will trying to make that so that there's only one. So simple backgrounds are a key. But of course, in a busy city that might not be possible. So sometimes you might have to wait for something to happen or people to move away from the area that you're photographing so that there aren't so many people in the photographs. And think about the composition beforehand and then just, get your settings in the camera all set for that particular shot that you have in your mind, and then just press the shutter button when that thing happens. That way you will maximize the minimalistic look in your image if you are patient and if you look your composition beforehand. And a tip for a simple background. Tilt your camera slightly downwards to crop out the top part, which is usually busy, so aiming a little lower might get rid of that busy background and you might get a really nice minimalistic street photograph. Focus on details. Urban areas and cities have lots and lots of details that can make really great minimalistic images. Just grab a partial thing of the scene, so crop and leave something out, and that will make the image more minimalistic to leave something out. That's the whole key and the whole point of this. And details also can tell great stories. You're leaving something out, people start wondering what the detail is and what's all about this, and it doesn't tell you everything. And that's one great part of minimalistic photography, is that it kind of leaves out stuff for the people to use their imagination, and sometimes the images can be a bit abstract and you don't really realize what it is. And there's a tip for this. Usually we use something like 28 to 50 millimeter lens and everything between when we're doing street photographs. But for details, you might have a bit longer lens. That makes it easier to isolate stuff and pick up those details even a bit further away or high up in a building. So a 75 millimeter could be sometimes a very good lens for street photographs if you're going for the details and minimalistic images. And negative space. Well, negative space is probably the most and commonly used way of making minimalistic images because, to be honest, most of the minimalistic images do have a lot of negative space. And what negative space is, it's an empty space around the subject. Usually if you have 2/3 of the area or there is nothing, then it's called negative space. Some call it white space, but negative space is probably more used term for that. And it doesn't mean that it has to be empty, but it needs to be something that is not too distracting and will take our attention away from the subject. That's a key to understand, that it doesn't have to be, just empty or anything like that, but having very little elements around the subject is the thing when you want to do minimalistic photographs using a large amount of negative space. And a tip, if you can't find any calm background, why not using moving object as your background? Here's an example. I was sitting and waiting at the metro station. Wanted to photograph using the metro coach as a background for my image of a person standing and waiting for the metro to arrive. The way it goes, you take a longer shutter speed and then just wait for the right moment, and it might take a little while to find someone that suits your image. Then geometry and lines. Look for geometric shapes and strong lines in your environment. Straight lines, curved lines can direct your viewer to the subject. Usually just an empty street with some shadows, for example, or some lines and stuff like that can be an image. But if someone steps into the image or you can see someone in the image, it usually gets better. So sometimes when you're doing minimalistic photographs, it's a good thing to wait for something to happen or something to enter the frame. So sometimes adding an element might boost up the image. And then shallow depth of field. In classical street photographs, we very seldom want shallow depth of field. We usually want to stop down because we want everything to be sharp in the image. And also one reason to stop down is to when we're using pre-focusing methods, so that we focus to a certain distance, let's say like 4 meters, and we stop down to 8. And with a wide-angle lens, a 35, 28, 40 millimeter lens, basically everything is sharp. So you don't need to worry about the focusing. And the reason, of course, is because that's the way to make the photographing a lot faster. But of course, sometimes shallow depth of field, opening up the aperture and making the background really nice and blurry, can be a very strong image. And that really brings the subject to our eyes, because the separation from the background is so obvious. So sometimes that is a great way of making negative space, just to throw out of focus everything that's kind of disturbing in the background. And that works quite well in many images too. But remember, in classical street photographs, we want to see the environment, so hiding the environment totally might not be a good idea. But of course, that's a kind of like an aesthetic decision that you as a photographer have to make. And of course, it depends on your style too, what you like and what type of images you are making. Play around with light and shadow. Shadows are really important in a photograph. Having a really dark background can serve as a negative space. Exposing for the highlights, you will make the shadows even darker, and in post you can make the image more contrasty by adjusting the curve or just adjusting the contrast slider. That will make contrast between the light part and the dark and the black part bigger, of course. And when you have a light part, we tend to see that first, and then the black part will serve as a negative space. I was taking this image. I wouldn't call this a minimalistic image because of the heavy shadow and light play what we have there. The composition and everything could be minimalistic composition, but the light makes it a bit too busy for it to being a minimalistic image. But when I was taking that image, I saw from the corner of my eye that there was this girl with the red sweatsuit walking, and luckily she went for the escalators down, and I just quickly turned my camera towards her and took the image. And I think this one is minimalistic, even though you have strong colors, you have the black coat from a guy that was following her, or with her rather, and the strong colors that we have on the light, because of course I made it a bit warmer and I cropped it a bit because it happened so quickly, so that I could catch the image, because I like this image a lot. And the dark area is a busy railway station, well, busy in our standards, and with the black background I could throw that as a negative space and hide what's over there, so that our eye will concentrate on the girl with the red sweatsuit. And after the 7th tip, I will have an extra tip, or it's actually an extra treat, and I'm so excited about that. And it has something to do with the next tip too, in a way. Limit your color palette. Sometimes lowering the saturation in an image makes it more minimalistic. This can be done at the spot, just photographing at the moment when there are not too many colors, or only one color that can be desaturated in post-production. That's one good way. That's what I always do in images. If there is something really bright, like a traffic sign or something that's too much attention, I might lower the saturation of that so that it's not so obvious anymore. It doesn't distract the image. And of course, sometimes turning an image to black and white image might help in that too. But that might not be the case if your thing is to photograph color photographs. Then just desaturating the colors might do the trick. Which takes me to the extra tip, or the extra treat for you guys. I have created Film Simulation Wizard with custom GPTs. It's totally free for you, but you need an OpenAI Plus account in order to access this custom GPT. I made Film Wizard for Ricoh GR3 and GR3X and also for Fuji X-Trans sensors. You can write a prompt, okay, I want this and that type of film, or you can use the 4 pre-set questions or suggestions that you could press. And here is one for Ricoh GR3. I asked them to make me a street photograph style in film recipe, and this is what it gave me. And of course, this is not perfect, far from it, but it's a fun way to start making the film recipes and testing how they work. And unfortunately, you cannot really download these. You have to, just make them by hand into your camera or inside your camera, and then, of course, remember to store them and then use them. But I think these are quite fun. And some of the images that I showed you, I did use these recipes. But I will make a video about this later, and I will tweak it a little bit. But I will get you so-called early access to it. And as I said, it doesn't cost anything. Just you need to have an OpenAI Plus account to use it. And let's talk a few more words about minimalistic street photographs. The whole point is to have an empty canvas, like we always do when we start photographing. But on this one, when you're doing minimalistic photographs, you really have to have it empty so that you can start adding components to it, either by making changing your angle of view, or changing the position or the camera angle or whatever, or wait for something to happen that adds the missing element to your image to make it more interesting. And here is a video about street photography and how you can be invisible when you're photographing, because that is one crucial part of being a street photographer, is to know how to act when you're making those street photographs. You might want to watch that if you haven't seen that yet. But hey, thanks for watching, and bye for now.